Today we're going to be going over my stabilizer lubing tutorial for screw ins, clip ins, everything. I'm going to show you guys how I lube stabilizers, pretty much how I've been doing it for the past 6 months. So this is how I get pretty consistent results. I do want to let you know that if you use clip-in stabilizers, they're really inconsistent and it kind of just depends on the board. Sometimes boards sound really good with clip-in stabilizers. Most of the time they don't. So in my opinion, I think that boards with screw-in stabilizers are infinitely better because they are just a lot more consistent. But I'm gonna be showing you guys my procedure for both. But for clip-in stabilizers, you definitely want to make sure that you clip the legs and apply a ton of lube, but we're gonna go over that in just a bit. So there's gonna be a few things that you guys need if you want to lube your stabilizers. The first thing is gonna be some tweezers to pull out your stabilizers on a pre-built or more of a budget keyboard. More or less, you're gonna use these to pull the stabilizer out, and it's pretty much the only way. You can try something else, maybe like a small screwdriver, but tweezers are the easiest way to get those out. So I'll leave a link to some in the description below. Next, you're gonna need a screwdriver, most likely to open up your keyboard case, but that is not always necessary, especially if you have clip-in stabilizers. But more or less, if you're gonna be using screw-in stabilizers, obviously, you need a screwdriver. You probably already have one at home. Flush cutters are really important because for clip-ins, more than likely you're going to need to clip off the extra ends. And I'll show you what I mean in just a bit. Some Krytox 205 grade 0 is basically the gold standard for lube. You can use other things like dielectric grease or XHT-BDZ on the wires if you want to, but for the rest of the stabilizers, you're definitely gonna want some of this 205 grade 0 or even 206 grade 0, which is a bit thicker. Next, we have a pretty simple lube brush. This one I got from Prevail Key Company. I will leave a link in the description below, but this is my favorite lube brush that I have so far. I also have the ones from Kinetic Labs, but I'm not really the biggest fans of them. And that's pretty much everything as far as 100% essential you need to do this small project. But having a jewelry picker to hold your stem is really nice. So you can find this on Amazon or from Prevail or from Kinetic Labs. I'll leave everyone linked in the description below. So if you're just buying a ton of stuff from one particular site, you can just bundle it all together and get everything you need pretty quickly. Now to pull out your clip-in stabilizer, you're gonna look for the side with this little pin here. Probably hard to see because my camera won't focus, but I'll put some close-ups on the screen right now so you guys can see. What you're gonna do, you're gonna lay your board flat on the table, simply just push up on this pin, and that will pop out your clip-in stabilizer. So pretty easy, you just pull it out after that. So not really anything that's too hard to do, just takes a bit of practice, but after you do it the first time, you'll be pretty smooth sailing from there, as it's quite easy to do. To snap it back in, all you gotta do is just remember that the side with the notches is the side where the wire goes. So you just put the wire in, snap, snap, easy. As far as stabilizers that I've had the most success with, these are some Durock piano plate mounted stabilizers. These have been my current favorite for probably about the past month, and I've been using these on more and more keyboards. They just have a really good and consistent sound that I've noticed, and probably the best in stabilizers. Specifically the piano plate mounted ones, the black ones and the white ones, they're just okay. They're just about as good as pretty much the stabilizers that come in most boards with clip-ins, meaning that they aren't really that good and they kind of suck, so I wouldn't really recommend them too much over these. As far as screw-in stabilizers go, these are the Durock V2s. I've been using these quite a bit. You can use Durock V2s or Zeals. Both are just about equally as good, but the Durock V2s I think are a little bit cheaper because I want to say these are around $20 to $25, and Zeal stabilizers I think might be around $40. I'll have to check though. I'll throw it up on the screen, but typically I like to use the Durock V2s for my screw-ins. But today I'm going to be building a KBD 67 Lite from the second run, and I'm actually going to be trying out these KBDFans stabilizers that come with these 67 Lite. So we're gonna give these a go for the first time, and I'm pretty sure that we can make them sound good pretty easily. So that should not be anything that we really have to worry about. As long as I apply the exact same methods that I typically do to the rest of my stabilizers, we should be in good shape. As far as everything that's typically included when you order stabilizers, you're gonna have your stems, your housings, your screws, your wires for your modifiers, your wires for your space bars. Usually it's either a 6 1/4 U or a 7 U. And then you have these little pads that go underneath the screws in the case of screw-in stabilizers. But if you have clip-in stabilizers, you typically will only have your wires, your stems, and your housings. Now this part is really important. This is the first thing that you should do if you have clip-in stabilizers. Even if you have some screw-ins like cherry screw-ins, they do typically have to be clipped because these little legs here will cause a bit of interference on your bottom mount, and it will make a little bit of a ticking noise on your PCB and it is really annoying. Now using stabilizer pads does help with that quite a bit, but you still want to clip these legs if you want your keyboard and your stabilizers to sound extremely good. And you're gonna notice that 2 of the legs are standing out a bit longer than the rest of them. So what you're gonna wanna do, you wanna take your flush cutters and you wanna grab one of those legs and just go ahead and clip it off. And then you're gonna flip it around to the other side and do the exact same thing. So now that when you take a look at the bottom of your stabilizer, you're gonna see that it is mostly flat, but the reason why you got these flush cutters is that you're gonna wanna go ahead and grab that little part in the middle and get as close as you can to make your stabilizer as flat as possible. So any area on the bottom that you see that's not completely flush, I'm gonna go ahead and take your flush cutters and try to make it as flush as possible. So ideally you would like your stabilizer to be this flat. This is going to give you the least amount of interference when it comes to the stem of your stabilizer smacking your PCB. So if your stabilizer has legs, you definitely want to make sure that you clip those legs to make sure that they are as even as possible. Before I show you guys how to lube, I do want to let you know how to properly assemble your stabilizer. So you'll notice that one part will have these 2 little openings, but you're going to have a bigger opening at the bottom and a smaller one up top. Obviously the smaller one is meant to be kept empty, and you want to make sure that when you put in your stabilizer that you don't put it in backwards. If you put it in backwards with the large hole facing the front of the stabilizer, then your wire is going to get stuck and it's not going to operate properly. So you want to make sure that you spin this thing around when you put your stabilizer in. You're gonna put your stem in your housing like this. Then you're gonna put your wire in the bottom hole and clip it to this little holder right here. And then you can test your stabilizer. And pretty much as long as you can test it and it works like this, it'll work on your board. So very, very easy stuff, simple stuff as well. This little tip right here will save you a ton of time. So just make sure that before you put your stabilizers on your board that you test them first, and that'll just make this task quite a bit easier. Okay, so now on to the actual stabilizers. The first thing that you want to do, dip your lube brush in your 205 grade 0, and you're going to start to lube all of your housing. So usually I just lube both sides, which is pretty much enough. If you have transparent housings, you just want to make sure that you can see a bit of the lube that you applied to the housing. Otherwise, you are going to be lubing your stems as well, and you don't want to over lube them, even though over lubing your stabilizers is really not the end of the world. But you just want to make sure that you've got enough so that you can get rid of really any scratch or rattle from the plastic on plastic action. And typically I like to go ahead and lube all of my housings first before I lube my stems. That way, since I'm going to be having them on a desk mat, I don't really want to get lube all over my table or my desk. So I just like to do things in sequence. I just kind of do all these real quick. Only takes me a couple of minutes. And then I go ahead and do my stems, and I'll put these stems straight away inside of these housings. So now that we have all the housings lubed, we're gonna go ahead and start lubing these stems. So we'll go ahead and apply some lube to both sides of the stem, and that's pretty much it. And as soon as I get done lubing the stem, I just go ahead and put it inside of the housing because I don't want to get all the lube all over my desk pad. And you got to make sure that you do it correctly. So you make sure that the part with the 2 holes is going to be toward the front of the stabilizer where the wire goes into the housing and stem. Now these are not fully necessary, but it does make the bottom out a little bit less harsh when you're using screw-in or even clip-in stabilizers. These are just some stabilizer pads that you can get from KBDFans. So you do have these, which are pretty fitted to your screw-in stabilizers, and they have a specific orientation which they go on, where you put the bigger opening by the bigger hole and the smaller opening by the smaller hole. But in case you're not interested in the complexities, you can use a simpler stabilizer pad installation method too, where you just take one of these little rectangles and you put it in between where your stabilizer legs land on your PCB. Now at this point, this is where I'm gonna go ahead and lube my stabilizer wires, which is pretty easy to do. All you're gonna wanna do is grab some lube, apply it very, very generously to the wire, basically where you have quite a bit that you can see, because some of this is going to get lost in translation when you do decide to put this into the housing like we are about to do in a second. But you want to make sure that you get the angle, because there is going to be some contact on the stabilizer housing. So you want to make sure that each of the contact points are indeed well lubricated. So at this point, you're going to grab your housing and your stabilizer wire, and you're going to put the wire through the bottom hole of the stabilizer stem And at this point, you can go ahead and test it just to make sure that it is indeed operational. This is kind of important because, again, if you don't, your keyboard will not be functional, or at least not fully functional, because one of your stabilizers will be stuck. Now I'm gonna go ahead and lubricate the other side again with the same amount of lube, which is quite a bit. You want to make sure that you are able to see it. And yeah, get a lot of lube on that wire, because once you put the wire through the housing, it's not going to be nearly as much at the very tip of the wire, which is kind of what you want, because that is indeed going to help to cut down on some of that stab rattle. So now you got your stabilizer fully assembled. It's time to go ahead and put it into the PCB. And you're gonna notice that there's one end that's threaded that goes into the smaller hole on the PCB. And there's another end with kind of a clip mechanism. You're gonna put that on the larger hole on the PCB. Then you're gonna wanna put your screw through one of the little spacers that are included with your stabilizers, and then go ahead and screw it down to the PCB. But you wanna remember not to screw it down too tight. All right, so now you have all of your stabilizers in your board, and at this point, before you go ahead and reassemble it, the first thing that you should do before you do all that work is test it. So you want to make sure you put a switch in there and a couple keycaps for all your stabilizers, and go ahead and test your stabilizers and see how they sound, and see if you want to change anything about them, add a little bit more lube, loosen up the screws, etc. But that's all I have for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this quick tutorial on how to lube your stabilizers. I do have a switch lubing tutorial that I will have coming out for you guys pretty soon, so you won't have a really long wait on that. I'm hoping to get that done by the next week, but I already filmed it. I just got to start editing it, but I also have some other videos that I filmed that I have to finish editing. So yeah, it's coming as quickly as it can. Pause. But yeah, guys, these are just all the methods that I use to lube up my stabilizers. Hopefully you guys thought that they sounded pretty good. If they didn't, well, you can do whatever you got to do. Add more lube, holy mod, all that good stuff. Do what you got to do. But this is typically what I do. I may change a couple things in the future, but for now, I don't see myself doing anything horribly drastic from everything that I listed in this video, and I've pretty much been doing it the same way for the past 6 months. And I've got it down to be pretty consistent between board to board, even though, you know, some boards with a polycarbonate plate, aluminum, whatever, they all sound a little bit different, and different keycap profiles also affect how your stabilizers sound. So if it doesn't sound quite right and you think that you did everything correct, maybe try it with another keycap profile, but it's okay. Nothing is perfect, and you don't have to make it perfect. It just has to be good enough for you to use and enjoyable, which is the main thing. But thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you guys are new to the channel as well, and I will see you in the next video.